Welcome everyone to Volunteering for Seniors virtual webinars for senior citizens and their caregivers. Good afternoon. This is Pratima Penumarthi, founder and president of Volunteering for Seniors. We are a 501c3 organization, and our mission is to reduce loneliness and isolation among seniors and help them stay more energetic. We aim at making sure that seniors blend into our communities without any difficulties. And we are achieving this through meaningful volunteering. We are dedicated to improving the lives of seniors in our community. Since the year 2021, we have been conducting numerous VFS virtual webinars, talk shows, conferences for senior citizens, and keynote presentations. With some even general sessions, all that which was focusing on supporting health and self-care for our seniors and caregivers of older adults and individuals of any age with or without dementia. You can know more about our organization by visiting our website, volunteeringforseniors.org. Also, a little bit quickly about our organization. We at VFS, which is nothing but Volunteering for Seniors, we listen, we respond, and we problem solve problems together. We connect seniors, information, or different resources that promote aging well, and of course, with independence. Our organization is an expanding community. It's an expanding community of volunteers that provide helping hand to senior citizens by providing them the much needed support. Our vision is to build a society where every senior is empowered to live life to the fullest potential. VFS strongly believes that relationship-based volunteer services are ideal as they provide more benefit for both senior and the volunteer. And this relationship is only formed between people, and that can provide the warmth, companionship that all lead to and maintain a high quality of life. So we just started today the VFS Stories of Hope. And to begin with the VFS Stories of Hope, the very first story we're going to talk about today and have, basically we'll have more on discussion based, is on story on receiving a challenging gift. And that is basically we have today with us Ramjee Vysyaraju, who's a kidney recipient. And we also have with us here Dr. Sonti, who was also once a kidney recipient, and now he's looking for a donor. People with end-stage renal disease need to have waste removed from their bloodstream via a machine, which most of us know as a dialysis, or a kidney transplant to stay alive. In today's talk of the VFS Stories of Hope, we have Ramjee Vysyaraju, who is from Tampa, Florida, and he's been there from last 27 years. He's blessed with he's blessed with 2 kids, one beautiful daughter and handsome son, 14 and 11 respectively. He's also working as a program manager for MetLife, and he received his kidney transplant in the year 2019. So today he will share with us his story about getting sick and the challenges he had accepting reality. He will also talk with us about being on dialysis while working, of course, while working full-time, finding an unexpected kidney donor and his recovery to health. So welcome Ramjee Vysyaraju.
Thank you, Pradnagara.
We also have, thank you, Ramjee, and we also have with us on our panel, Dr. Sonti, who is from the state of Massachusetts, and he lives in Mansfield, and he's been living here for the last 23 years. He has a son who's 23 years old, and he works now at SpaceX, and his daughter, who is 18, and she's studying pre-med at UConn. Currently, Dr. Sonti is working at Sartorius Biotech as principal engineer. He's building chromatography equipment used to make drugs and vaccines. So in the year 2006, he had his first transplant that failed in the year 2020 during COVID. So he's been on dialysis since then, and is looking for donors. So welcome, Dr. Sonti.
Thank you, Pratima.
So today it'll be a very interactive talk show. But to begin with, Ramjee Vysyaraju, could you just please go through your personal life and share your story with us?
Sure. My family story of kidney disease started almost 30 years ago when my grandfather got sick. He was around 69, 70 at the time. We came to find out that his kidneys started failing. At that moment, nobody really knew what was the cause, but upon multiple examinations, we finally figured out that it is due to polycystic kidney disease that he was suffering from. Once the diagnosis was made, the doctors then started talking to my parents and his siblings to get their kidneys checked, because apparently the polycystic kidney disease passes from generation to generation. And we don't know before my grandfather who had it, but the earliest known incidence was from he being getting sick at the time. So then my father, my uncle, my aunt got tested and confirmed that they all carry the same bad gene that would potentially put them at risk as they age. During 1992, when my grandfather was diagnosed, it was pretty much the last stage for him. Renal transplant was not an option, maybe due to age, maybe due to the situations of care available in India at the time. He was on dialysis for a few months and then he finally passed away. Immediately after that, my father was confirmed that his kidney condition was deteriorating. Similarly, within few years, my uncle's kidney condition was deteriorating too. So within a span of 4 to 5 years, my grandpa passed away, and then my father and my uncle, my aunt, all of them got diagnosed with the disease. The strange thing about PKD is some people with the disease can pretty much live their full life without getting impacted. Even though they carry the disease, even though kidney function gets destroyed over a period of time, the kidney function doesn't really get destroyed to an extent where they actually need dialysis or a transplant. So I think if you keep that in mind, my grandfather was on that side of the spectrum. He was lucky. He pretty much lived his life. I know 69, 70 is not too old, but considering the disease, the impact of the disease and what it can do to your body, the fact that he lived through that age was pretty good. I think he was fortunate. My dad, by the time he reached the age of 49, this was in 1996, he was in the end-stage renal disease and he was on dialysis. And then we started looking for a matching kidney. My mother tested for it. Luckily, my mother was a match and he went through the transplant in 96. However, due to various complications, within 6 months, his body stopped responding and he went into some sort of medical coma and then he passed away within a few days. So he only survived after the transplant for 6 months. Then a few years later, my uncle went through the same thing. He was searching for a donor. He was on dialysis for a while. He was searching for a donor. Luckily, one of the cousins in the family came forward and gave the kidney. He had a better result with the transplant. He survived for like 7 years. And at the age of 53, 54, he passed away. Pretty much the same situation, you know. As a transplant patient, in order to save the graft, you are asked to take immunosuppressant drugs for life. Otherwise, the foreign organ, the grafted organ, basically gets rejected. So in order to fool your immune system, you are forced to be on immunosuppressant for life. And due to that, not only you're stopping the rejection, but at the same time, the overall body defense mechanism is getting impacted. So you don't have your necessary defenses, even for normal cold, cough, things like that. You will have to be more careful in terms of how to manage when you get sick, be proactive, get the medical help immediately. So the amount of supervision, the amount of, the level of treatment, the speed at which the treatment is given to you is quite different from a normal person whose immune system is, just the natural way. So we don't understand what happened in case of my uncle. Same thing, his body stopped responding to some infection that he got, and then within few days he passed away. Then the third casualty, in fact, the fourth casualty in our family was my aunt. My aunt again kind of fell into the path of what my grandpa went through. So she lived up to 66 years. At the age of 66, she started getting really sick. Then she was on dialysis, and in 2019, she finally passed away after the transplant. She also didn't survive the transplant. Within 3 months, actually, she got severely ill and she fell on the floor and she died. So we don't really have a good history with the transplant either, especially for the transplant that are done in India. So all these years, ever since my grandpa was diagnosed and when my father was diagnosed, I knew that I had to find out what would be my fate in terms of this bad gene that had the chance of coming into my system, right? So I think in mid-20s, I found out that I also carried the gene. My kidneys were not too huge at the time, but based on the timeline that I've seen for my uncle and my father and my grandpa, I was hoping I was on the other side of the spectrum, meaning maybe I will be okay till I reach 60s and in 70s. And then at the time, if I really need a transplant, then we'll think about it. But that didn't happen. I started getting sick when I turned 40. That's when the kidney function started slowly dropping a little faster than what it was before I turned 40. By the time I turned 48, it was pretty much a clear-cut scenario that I needed some intervention, either through dialysis or transplant. So in a way, I was prepared ahead of the time for the ultimate scenario that would play in my life. So it was not a surprise, but it was not a pleasant journey either. We knew every day is going to be a challenge. We knew everything has to be planned in terms of whatever treatment option that I can actually get to. The immediate treatment option was dialysis. And at the same time, my kidneys were growing pretty rapidly. The disease, the bad gene that I carried essentially induces small water pockets in the kidney mass, and eventually it kills the entire kidney mass and your kidneys become bloated. My kidneys, actually I got the bad kidneys removed post-transplant in 2021, and they were together, they weighed 12 pounds. That's how bad the kidneys became. So your kidney is supposed to be of the size of your fist, and mine were like this much. Anyway, so in 2018, when the GFR level dropped to a point where I was considered an eligible candidate for transplant, the first thing I had to do was to make sure that I'm ready for the dialysis option. And we were discussing hemodialysis or the peritoneal dialysis. The doctor recommended peritoneal because that can be done at home. So we went that route. They would put a catheter in your tummy and you hook up to your machine 8 to 9 hours a day in the night. And the machine does its job to clean your blood, and you go back to your daily activity the following day. Because I was working, because I couldn't necessarily step away from not getting any income to run the family, I chose that path. Hemodialysis is also viable, but then it would take you, it would force you to be away from your work for a longer period of time during the day. So considering the options, and peritoneal seemed to be the best option choice for us. At the same time, while that was going on, in fact, I didn't reach the stage of dialysis before I realized that I really needed help. Number one thing that I needed to convince myself is, whether I like it or not, in order to survive, I need the help of medical technology. At the same time, I really need help from a person, a real person, to actually get a second lease on my life, right? If generally, if you're talking about cancer or some other ailment, your dependency on another person's generosity is zero, meaning,
Yeah.
there is drugs that you can take, and then you fight through, you go through surgeries, and you're fine, and hopefully with God's help, you get out of the mess, and then you lead a healthy life. But in this situation, my well-being actually is dependent on somebody's generosity that cannot be measured, right? So meaning, to have a relatively decent lifestyle, to come out of the disease and the impact that it had on your body, somebody has to give their organ, whether after they passed away or they are still living. So the donation, the type of donation is called cadaverous donation versus living donation. Everybody would like to have a living donation because it has better chances of survival. It has better quality of life in terms of the graft, as well as the longevity of the graft and all that. But it is not something that you say, hey, come on, give me your kidney and I'm going to be fine, right? And it's not a simple transaction like that. And you can't even ask directly to anyone. It's a sensitive topic. Even the person loves you the most may not be in a position to donate their organ to make you live, because literally you're in simple terms, literally you're asking somebody to cut your organ and give it to someone for an altruistic reason that cannot be artificially motivated, right? We cannot bribe people. You cannot give something in return. It's such a impossible scenario of generosity. It has to come within the person that he is willing to donate. So there is no easy way to plan for these kind of things. But the only thing that I can do is to ask people for help, that I need your help to survive. But the challenge was, how do I do that? You can't invite people over and then for dinner and then say, hey, by the way, would you consider giving me your kidney so that I can live? It's not a simple conversation like that. But one thing that I realized is, if I do not decide to seek help, there is nobody that would come forward to help me out. Because if they don't know what I'm going through, and there is no reason for them to come forward and then say, hey, by the way, I have an extra kidney, do you want one? Nobody does that, right? So it all, in hindsight, it all looks like a huge drama, but nobody wants to hear about. But if you are living through the turmoil of making a decision in terms of what should I do to ask help, what should I do to make sure that I actually am there for my family next 5 to 10 years, 12 years, whatever that is, right? So we finally decided to do passive campaign that with the hope of getting attention of good-hearted people. Mm-hmm. I'm not necessarily saying not everybody is good-hearted, but in this situation, having a good heart means actually making a huge, huge sacrifice without any direct transaction related to the sacrifice. So we started taking help of social media. I wrote messages on the car, on the rear window. I wore T-shirts that kind of carried the message saying that you can help me live, I need a kidney and things like that. And I was not really sure what would that mean to me, right? The only thing that I was sure is I knew I can at least get my dialysis procedure set up so that I can have the necessary energy to fight through. So that was going on. And again, it's with some divine intervention, my colleague that I actually am not friends with at that time, happened to hear about my condition, and he said, he called me and said, I am going to give you my kidney. And I still don't understand what motivated him to do that. So I was happy to hear that. So he went through the testing at Tampa General Hospital to screen himself to be a potential donor, and he was rejected. This was in 98, August, September timeframe. So in the meantime, when he was rejected, he was pretty disappointed, but then he didn't understand, or he didn't accept the reason that they gave him, that you're not a viable candidate for the transplant. So they gave him a list of things that he could get under control so that he can try again to be a donor. So the tricky part is, while he was going through this process, I cannot necessarily ask other people to get tested as a potential donor. So he had to withdraw his candidacy. And during because of the passive campaign that I did, people saw the message, or people heard about what somebody else told them. So there's few other people came forward to get tested to be a donor. So in that process, 2 more people came through, and they didn't qualify for various reasons, because of maybe their health condition, or maybe certain parameters, or maybe sometimes the tissue matching doesn't work, various factors that the program has as guidelines. And it so happened, my neighbor in the maybe 10, 15 houses from our place also happened to see the message, and then he came over and said, Ramjee, I'm going to test for you. And let's see, he knew that, another colleague was going through the process, and then he was rejected, and he was on the sidelines and trying to see if he can move forward or not. So he tested, and he was a match. And it so happened at the same time, a nurse from local medical clinic was also going through testing. So it so happened that while she was going through the testing, she took a pause for some reason because she needed to be away from town. So we were able to get my neighbor tested. So we had 2 people matched and waiting to go. And again, there is a confusion in terms of, who would be the candidate. So, and while this was happening, Brian came back almost 7 months later in April 2019, and Brian was the original, my colleague, the very first donor who tested. And he called me in April 2019 saying that, Ramjee, I'm approved. So it was surreal for me to understand, okay, what do you mean you're approved? I didn't quite understand what he had to go through. So apparently he lost 35 pounds of weight, and he exercised heavily so that he was off the blood pressure medicine. He was off the pain medicine that he was taking. So he has done all these things behind the scenes. And we were in touch, but I was not really privy to what all he was doing behind the scenes to be a candidate again. So he basically didn't want to accept the fact that the hospital said you're not a candidate. So he took almost nine months or so to go through all these things, and finally tested again, and the panel approved. So then I was confused in terms of, okay, you are approved, another nurse from the medical clinic is almost getting approved, and my neighbor is waiting for me to say yes. So how do we deal with this? Because it's hard for me to say, sorry, I found a spare part somewhere else, and then I don't need it. It was very difficult to have a conversation with these people. So, but everybody understood. They understood that only one person can go through. They understood that somebody, they have to voluntarily withdraw so that they give chance for the other person to be a donor. So we arranged all that in the month of April 2019, and probably through good part of May, and my surgery was finally scheduled for June 5th, 2019, and Brian gave his left kidney to help me live. So that's how this whole story unfolded. As I said, if I narrate now, it looks quite simple and maybe over dramatic, but going through those steps on a daily basis, you're always waiting for a phone call to say, hey, I'm a match. But you also know that I'm a match doesn't mean the transplant is guaranteed, because they still have to go through so many other things. But one thing I can tell you, what I learned is, since I was pretty determined to let the story be known through various channels that I had access to, I think that's what made people realize the gravity of the situation and come forward. I mean, the fact that I was lined up with 4 donors is not a small thing. And all 4 of them were willing to help me out. So as a sidebar, though, I would like to mention one more thing, though. After Brian gave me his kidney and I started getting better, 3 months later, my neighbor, who was also a match, called me and said, Ramjee, are you good? Meaning you're good with what you got, doing well, 100% confident that you don't need my kidney. And he made sure that he waited for those 3-4 months, and he made sure that I'm okay. And then he walked into Tampa General on November 14th, 2019 and said, take my kidney. He gave it to somebody that he never met.
Amazing.
Wow. So I feel fortunate to be part of that story also. Yes, the story started with my campaign, but to find somebody like my neighbor who is willing to help at any cost, whether it's me or somebody else, I think is a great story to tell.
Absolutely. Ramjee Garu, like, this is so amazing. As I was hearing this story all through the time, I was thinking that if eventually when this is recorded and when we show to others, I mean, this is so motivating for people. They have to realize the importance of basically, like your neighbor and your colleague and the other 2 people who came forward, the nurse, the feeling of empathy that I need to go and help someone. So this is something that has to come from within. It's very hard. You're actually truly blessed in that entire process, what you went through. On the other side, now we have Dr. Sonti, and of course, he's going to just, Dr. Sonti, if you can just tell us, about the first transplant, what went through, and then why was there a big breakthrough in between, and then now you're again looking for a donor. Srinivas Garu, I think you're on mute.
Okay. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for giving this opportunity, Pratima Garu. So I don't know where exactly to start, but I don't have as great a story that Ramjee has, but my story probably started a few years after marriage. I went for a general checkup, and then that's when they found out that my kidneys are failing. But they couldn't tell me what could be the reason for failing. They did mention that reflex nephropathy is the most likely cause. So the kidney itself is not bad. They're perfectly all right. But something else that went wrong, which was not caught in time, which destroyed the kidneys. So that's, a long story short, that's what it is. So I was probably around 30, or so when they first told me about it, because that's when I got a thorough checkup. If I had gotten the checkup much earlier, I probably would have found out, maybe even in my teenage life, but that didn't happen. So anyway, now that they found out, they told me in about so many years, it's going to fail, which is okay. I thought, something will happen and we'll find something. But in those years, we waited and waited. Basically, I was every few months, I have to go for checkup when I could see that slowly and gradually deteriorating, which is pretty bad, because Ramji mentioned, it's a fight. Then your battles have now shifted from your daily activities of work, family, and all, shifted to something else that at that time you think you're going to win at some point, but later on I realized that was a losing battle. Continued for the next 10 years. When the doctors couldn't do anything about it, they also just watched and waited. They said it's a chronic, the kidneys are chronically going down, and so it's only inevitable. At some point, you will need a transplant. So we went through many things, and being, a research engineer, I started to explore a number of possible avenues, alternate medications and everything, but nothing seemed to have helped. And eventually, the same conclusion came to the same endpoint: the kidneys failed. So I was put on dialysis. I, had both the hemo and the peritoneal dialysis, because the first thing they do, to get you on the peritoneal dialysis, it takes time, and when the kidney starts to fail, it comes to a certain point and it's like a cliff. It just drops. It's not like a smooth curve to the end. It just goes in, and then it stops. So I had that situation. So I immediately rushed to the hospital, and they plugged in at my neck the hemo ports, and then did hemodialysis until I was plugged in with the peritoneal dialysis, which obviously at a younger age is the only viable choice if you want to earn and be able to feed your family. So we did that. And I was on it for about 6 months or so, but I started doing this campaign a little bit earlier, even before my kidney started to fail. So I not only campaigned here in US, but to my ancestral country, India, and I started to campaign there as well. So finally, many people came forward, but pretty much everybody who came forward got rejected, which was very devastating at that time, because every time you hear these rejections, it keeps going. So we went through that, but finally one person was a match, and I went through a lot of legal battle to bring that person here, which we did, and eventually I got the transplant, and that turned out to be pretty good. And that I don't want to, she didn't want to reveal much about her, but that lady was a good friend from childhood, so that worked out. So once I got the transplant, it took about 13 years for it, and it was gradually coming down too. So it was like a chronic gradual fail. Again, it wasn't very obvious what was causing it to fail, but it was failing. And the other thing was the immunosuppressives, the way they explained it to me, and I did my own research also a little bit. Immunosuppressives, they do protect your kidney, but they also cause some damage to the kidney. So it's a balance that they have to do. So this is it's almost like an art for the nephrologist to actually go through this. And so he was successfully able to bring 13 years of life into this. So obviously, it was going both backwards and forwards, in the sense that the immunosuppressor was protecting me, but they could see a little bit of a failure, a very slow chronic failure, and also nephrotoxicity caused by the immunosuppressors. So eventually 2020 came, and everybody knows, during the COVID, I also got COVID. Uh, it was pretty easy for me to get it. So I got it. And that immediately put the kidney down. Fortunately, I survived. This was still in the early stages of the COVID. I somehow survived. I was hospitalized for quite a bit. But then they told me that, hey, all of your organs, they came back and they're recovering, your lungs are recovering and everything is okay, but your kidneys, sorry, they're not recovering. So anyway, they immediately put me on dialysis again. This time I did not go with peritoneal dialysis, mainly because the first time I went through that process, we had at least a couple of times, it was a disaster for me, with all sorts of bad things happening. So 2 times it failed. In fact, once we went on, so going on vacations while you're on dialysis is almost impossible because you're tied somewhere. But with peritoneal dialysis, you could take the equipment home, with you, which I did. And we went about 4 or 5 hours from my place to a vacation. And right there, the dialysis failed. Peritoneal dialysis actually failed. So right on that vacation. So it was a bad luck. Immediately I started off. Me and my wife came back, left other, my family and friends. They continued and just we came back, and I had to go to another surgery for peritoneal dialysis, because the way that works, you have the tube that is inserted into the peritoneum, right? So there is a stomach and there's the outer lining. So it's inserted in the middle, and that's where they put fluid in there. And what the fluid does is, through osmosis, slowly gets all the toxicity, and including the important elements like potassium and phosphorus. It extracts it to a balanced level. Then you essentially take that fluid out and put new fluid in. So you're carrying some fluid all the time, and that's continuously dialyzing you. So continuously things are coming out, which is good. That's a good thing. And that way you can continue with your life, but you're carrying this big bag of water all the time. And then the tube itself that's inserted, it has to be put in place. It has to stay and located at one place. If it moves to a different position, in which it will happen quite often because it's inside your body, and your body tends to move things around to take care of it, and also try to throw things out if it looks foreign. So anyway, that moved to a different location, and that immediately stops the dialysis. So now they have to do the surgery again and then replace it and do all those sort of things. So complications happen. It's not a very smooth ride either. Mm-hmm. And of course, there is also hernias that could happen because there's a bag of water that's outside of your stomach, and that's going to keep putting and pressuring everywhere. So other complications happen too. So anyway, now this time I chose to go with hemodialysis, and fortunately, again, with hemodialysis, the biggest problem is you have to go to the center. The center is open only at certain times, and three times a week you're there. You really cannot function normal anymore, and companies, they would rather have you take a leave of absence and go. Um, so what I did was I basically requested that I'm going to do this at home if there is a way. And fortunately, a few years ago, there was a big push from the government that, there's a home hemodialysis needs to happen. So I was lucky enough to get into that. I got trained to do the dialysis at home, and I brought the equipment home. And still, you still need to have somebody watching you all the time and help you with plugging in, plugging out, because you have only one hand. The other hand is tied down, and things could go wrong with that. So, but being an engineer, research engineer, I was able to manage this much better. Um, then we brought the equipment home. In fact, it's sitting right next to me here. And then every day, every other day, I plug myself in and do the dialysis. So usually I do this after work. I come home, and this is what I do. And then have dinner and then go to sleep. Sometimes if I'm delayed, then it's late and it goes into the night, so somebody needs to watch. Why it's risky even at home? Because there are things that could easily go wrong very quickly. As once the machine malfunctioned, and somewhere from behind it leaked blood to the floor, and I didn't even know I was leaking. But usually, if there's a blood leak, you fall asleep. You tend to feel sleepy, and sometimes you just fall asleep. And I fell asleep, and luckily my wife was there. She saw this and she pulled me back. So that's one example. And sometimes the way it is plugged in is not right. The way sometimes a clot could go in, so you have to be careful about that. Clots are dangerous. You form a clot and gets into your body, that could cause other problems. You take too much fluid out, then your blood pressure drops, and you could go unconscious. So there are many challenges with it. But it's been 2 years, so I've been handling it. There were situations that came up, scary situations, and we managed it so far. Also, the one thing that you need to remember with hemodialysis is, because between two hemodialysis, you are not really, going to the bathroom or anything. So what happens? Your toxicity slowly accumulates. So what you eat is extremely important. Pretty much, my ancestry is from a southern part of India, which is a very tropical country, and I'm a vegetarian. For generations we have been. So for us vegetarians, used to tropical vegetables and fruits is a lot more challenging, because now you're talking about things like coconut, mangoes, bananas. There's plenty, and that you grow up eating that a lot. You can't eat because they are very high in potassium. And potassium, as you know, is a very dangerous product in your body. If it goes beyond a certain point, it actually runs your entire nervous system. So if potassium is too high or too low, it basically is the nervous system that's running your heart, your other bodily functions, your brain, everything. It just stops, and within seconds you get, the heart will stop. So, and same thing with phosphorus. That also has some dangerous effects. So you want to maintain that. Vegetarians also tend to be very, dairy food focused. So I do eat a lot of dairy food that has full of phosphorus. So being a vegetarian, it's very challenging. And between two dialysis, again, one of the reasons I did opt home is so I have more flexibility on dialysis. So I can do more often if by any chance I feel that I ate something that I shouldn't have.
Yeah.
So that helps a little bit. But of course, you still have 2 days, a day gap in between. So it starts to accumulate, and you have to be very careful how much you're accumulating. There is no easy solution. There is no, plug and check and see, hey, how much potassium I have, how much phosphorus I have today. Like diabetes, you can actually check the levels of sugar in you, but you can't. So we don't know when you're going over. And that's another challenge. So it's not only challenging to do the dialysis at home by yourself, obviously with some help, and that person is also tied down, but it's also challenging to make sure your food and diet is okay and maintained in a way that you're not exceeding anything. And of course, there are other drugs that you can take that will extract the potassium out, but that has to be done right at the time of food, or phosphorus out, you take it at the time of food. So there are many other ways people are doing it, but those are all challenges. So the lifestyle by itself is very challenging. You want to travel somewhere, they do say that you can carry the equipment, but it's a challenge. You have to carry lots of fluids with you, because bags and bags, 30 liters of fluid, dialysate fluid is needed, and that you need to carry with it. All those are challenging. So it's not impossible, but it's a lifestyle that is difficult. You
Coming
just
to
don't
that
want to
point,
live with it.
Srinivas Garu, just to cut you there, and thank you. You've given us so much in detail about this point about the life on dialysis, which you are right now. Exactly where you are explaining now about your taste, being a vegetarian, which is another point which you explained now. I want to just bring the same point, Srinivas Garu, again to Ramjee Garu to just talk about how did you find, like, just compared to what Srinivas Garu just explained, right, about the life on dialysis and what are the different things that he went through. And it was so informative, that because he'd been a researcher too, he was able to do much more in detail research and find other things. But also on your part, Ramjee, how did you find, what were the challenges you faced with respect to your lifestyle? And when you were on dialysis, what were the things that you faced with respect to your diet? Was it equivalent to what Dr. Srinivas was undergoing? Was it same or was it different?
Overall, the difficulties associated with when your plumbing sewer system doesn't work the way it is supposed to is the same. Basically, kidney is your sewage plant, right? And if that fails, the bad stuff that gets, the contaminants, the pollutants that get accumulated in your body, they kill your functionality internally pretty fast. So you don't always feel, you look okay. Like if nobody knows that you're going through dialysis, it's very hard to perceive that the person actually is sick. But internally, you don't feel good. In my case, just prior to the dialysis, the fluid accumulation in body is crazy. The legs would swell, right? So I was put on diuretics to get the fluids out of the body. Once I'm on, again, in terms of all the electrolyte balance that he just spoke about, the phosphorus, the potassium, the other stuff, I stopped eating potatoes, I stopped eating tomatoes, I stopped eating leafy vegetables. So what you could eat is very limited: cauliflower, cabbage. You can use on the peritoneal dialysis, the way the mechanism works, you also lose a ton of protein. So you are again asked to eat a little bit of protein to keep up with the albumin count. Everything is a balance, right? The blood work gets checked quite often. Every time you look at the blood work, it's all over. If something doesn't jive with what it is supposed to be, you figure out what you ate, what you didn't eat. Honestly, you survive, but you just survive, because the way I convinced myself is that I am surviving so that when the help arrives, I'm actually there to receive the help, right? That's the mode you get into. But you're not living life to the fullest potential. You don't feel fine. There's nausea associated with it. You want to eat, but then you realize, I can't eat this. You're weak. Your hemoglobin count goes so low. You feel cold all the time. Middle of the summer, I was wearing sweatshirts, right? Nobody would understand that. I couldn't put my feet in the pool. The pool is heated. It's 90 degrees, but I couldn't put my feet in the pool because it's so cold for me.
Ramjigar, just stopping right there and coming to when you said you're feeling cold, is it the same situation now for you, Srinivas Garu? Do you feel the same thing?
So
do you feel very cold, like the sun condition that now Ramjee Garu had it?
Yes, definitely. I used to do that. And even in the car when I'm driving around, I used to crank the heat up. Everybody in the car would be very unhappy about it. But I used to feel cold, really cold about that.
So it is, so it is, as Ramjee Garu was saying, it's a normal thing because your body you automatically need to take so much of, it's not ready to take the normal temperature as a normal person, right? So your system keeps deviating.
Not only the temperature, but sometimes they do give you procrit, that you can inject that will generate more blood, more hemoglobin. And even that also, you had to be careful. In one case, I really had that hemoglobin keep climbing up, which is also dangerous. And that could help a little bit with this. But the other thing that I wanted to mention was the taste. The taste of food also changes completely. In fact, when I got my transplant, the first thing I remember mentioning to my wife was, "Wow, I didn't know the rice could taste this good, actually." And I've been eating rice all my life. So, you never know.
So Srinivas Garu, coming again to that circle, because even you went through that, right? This happened before your transplant. And after your transplant, as you said, now you felt the food was tasting so delicious, right? And coming to the same point to you, Ramjee Garu, did you have the same thing when you got your transplant and you felt that there was absolutely the same situation what Srinivas Garu had, or you had different, like?
No, luckily, because I was on dialysis I didn't really wait for my kidneys to completely fail. So in a proactive manner, I began the dialysis. So the metallic taste and all that didn't really kick in for me. However, the food was not the same. Obviously I wouldn't, I knew, I would ask my wife to say, can you make this today? Expecting a certain level of taste in my mouth. And then I would get disappointed. It's not tasting the same. What's wrong with this? And it's hard for them to understand because they taste it fine, right? So, and then after I got on dialysis, it got a little better. But I think to really enjoy the food like a normal person only happened after the transplant was done.
That's what Srinivas Garu was telling. Yeah, so it makes a huge difference with respect to your diet and what you eat. And taste is the biggest factor with ordinary people who don't face it, don't really understand what the person is undergoing with that part. Coming to the next part of the question with respect to, of course, we talk now with the diet and what we did. I want to really now just talk with respect to the donors. So this is first for Srinivas Garu, and then this question goes back to you, Ramjee. So Srinivas Garu, what do you think, how long is that waiting list for the cadaver donors? And how do even they get on the waiting list?
Is that for me?
Yeah, that's for you. And then, of course, the same question I want to also ask Ramjee Garu.
Yeah, I think depending on your blood group, it could take longer, especially with second transplant. It could be much longer because you also developed certain antigens, antibodies in you. So you are already, specifically in my case, I'm B positive, but that doesn't matter. The good news today is anybody who is of any blood group can come forward. It goes into a pool, and from the pool, they would give another kidney to me. And the pool, somebody else who matches that takes it. So it's kind of like a swap. So, which wasn't there 15 years ago, or it was kind of there, but not really organized. Today we have it. So it doesn't matter what blood group you are in. Once you give into the pool, and if it is for me that they have given into a pool, then I get a voucher. And the voucher basically says the next candidate who comes in that matches me will immediately be able to donate to me. So typically for a cadaver donor, it's about 5 to 8 years of waiting, depending on not only your blood group, but also how many antigens or antibodies you have developed against certain antigens, HLA antigens. So because for me, it's a second transplant, I have developed more. So there's a little bit longer, but it's not impossible. Living donor is probably the fastest because that happens immediately. Somebody gives into the pool, and then they would look at the entire database of the country and then basically pull the best match for me. And that's how it would work. So living donor is immediate, few months. Immediate is usually 6 months or so, but cadaver is 5 to 8 years.
But Srinivas Garu, again, back to you itself, is that, I mean, you were searching for the living donors, and this has crossed how many months till now?
It's been 2 years. I've been
even
looking
for living donors, right? It's
for
gone.
living donors. Yes.
Yeah.
A couple of people came forward, did several months of testing, and then it wasn't. They did not become eligible. So these things do happen. People come forward, not eligible, and that's the end.
I know.
So I continue to wait.
And coming back to Ramjee Vyasaraju garu, like, what do you think and what did you feel like, for how was it easy? And how, of course, you explain in your story, but how can one get a kidney from a deceased donor, and how can they approach that? How can you just explain that part?
So in my case, what happened, because I knew that the disease runs in the family, and I pretty much knew from almost mid-20s that the eventual outcome would be so and so. So I was always on the proactive side. I didn't all of a sudden find out that I needed a dialysis, and then I didn't do anything last minute. So once the GFR level dropped down 15, officially you become eligible to register as a transplant patient. So in early 2018, I registered, and it's been almost 1 year after I got put on the waiting list. And after 1 year, I finally reached the dialysis stage. So in a way, I kind of gained a year for the cadaver donation to happen. If I didn't find the donor like I did, I probably would have waited for 5 to 8 years, depending on different factors and how many kidneys are available in a region, what is the match factor, what is the age. There are so many things. It's very hard for you to actually develop an algorithm to say is definitely by this time you will get it. So, but one thing that I personally have observed is that after my story went public, there is probably 12 or 13 candidates that Telugu speaking candidate actually came to me that they started opening about their challenges. I'm in the same boat. What did you do? How to handle it? Because I don't know. In general, I never tried to hide what I went through. Maybe that's how I am. So whatever, good or bad, whatever experiences that I had, it was always public. I let people know that this is what is going on. Mm-hmm. Some people heard it, some people didn't care, some people made negative comments, some people acted as if they never knew me. You'll see all kinds of behaviors and reactions. I don't find fault with anyone, but it's how you handle your emotions. I guess each person does it differently. So I knew that if living donor doesn't come forward, it's a wait time of 5 to 8 years. That's given. But what I've learned is after I started advising other people, I have a couple folks registered with Campa General in addition to the local hospitals that they were in, right? And it so happened they got transplant within 1 year after registering with Campa General. It may be pure luck, I have no idea. Otherwise, they would have waited for 5 to 6 years at the local hospital that they registered. So again, what was the magic? I don't know. It just, I shared the experience and I said, listen, you're not going to lose anything. I'm here. If you really get a call from Tampa General, you don't have to worry about accommodation. I'm here. You fly here. We'll take you to the hospital. And during the recovery, you come stay with us, right? I think that's the assurance that I gave to these candidates. Mm-hmm. Having gone through the mess myself, if you're not a local candidate and you're registering with the hospital, finding accommodation, staying, getting help or care when you are going through the transplant, not an easy task. So I basically assured that, listen, register. If the call comes, you don't think twice. Just fly, go to the hospital, and then you have a home here to come back and recoup. So I think that's what made them confident, and they registered. Within 1 year, they got a transplant, and everything was happy, right? I mean, happy, not to the perfect scenario, but instead of waiting for another 4 or 5 years, the transplant did happen. So I'm happy about that. But is it possible to register in multiple locations? The one thing that you would want to consider is, if you are registering in a location where there is a possibility of getting the cadaverous donation a lot earlier, make sure that you have some kind of support system, meaning a friend, or maybe do your research ahead of the time. When the time comes, if you really have to get treated in that hospital, figure out the logistics. Okay, I can maybe rent an Airbnb for 3 months, or maybe I can do this for 3 months, whatever. But don't apply and then not have a plan. It's not useful, because when the call comes to you, you literally have to get on the plane and go within 4 to 5 hours so that the donation can actually happen.
Right. It's a very, very informative part you gave, Ramjee Vysyaraju. The next coming very important point is the age limit point of it. So are there any age limits or medical conditions that rule out organ transplantation?
In Tampa General, the basic rule is, I think, if you have to be above 18 and normally healthy condition, just to come forward. The upper limit, I don't think there is an upper limit, but I heard some people saying that 65, but I'm not 100% sure. But all the calls that I got, the basic question that I would ask is, are you above 18? And are you of the same blood type? As an initial screening. As Srinivasa Garu just mentioned, you don't have to be of the same blood type, because if you're screened and if you're deemed as a viable candidate for donation, your kidney can be given to somebody else and somebody else can be your donor. So that's not an issue anymore. But typically, some people say, hey, if I'm a match to you, I would want to give you. Why would I want to be in a pool and help somebody else? So that also plays in the equation here. Not everybody, just like my neighbor who walked into the hospital on November 14, 2019 and said, take my kidney. That's a 1 in a million chance type of a situation, right? So in general, when you're campaigning, the donor wants to connect with you. The donor wants to actually see how they are making the difference in your life. And that only happens if they are giving you directly, rather than, hey, I need a kidney, but you can save me in an alternative way. By the way, I never hid the fact that you can only give to me. I always said, for some reason, you test for me and you're not a match, And I encourage you to keep an open mind so that somebody else can benefit through the process. Some people actually did keep that in mind, and they move forward with that. So I didn't know what happened eventually with the nurse who actually came forward. She said the same thing when I asked her to withdraw so that Brian could be my donor. She said she will move along and help somebody else. But afterwards, due to privacy laws and all that, I didn't get a chance to actually, be in touch with the person and find out what actually happened.
Okay, that's interesting. But Srinivas, now coming to you, the first time when you said, the first transplant when you had, of course, there was a rejection. So how often does this rejection happen?
So how did my first transplant got rejected?
Yes.
Yeah, as I mentioned, that there are two ways by which it gets rejected. If somebody has originally a chronic autoimmune problem, that's a different story, and that also rejects kidneys. For me, they basically explained it, two possible things that happen. One, the body itself very slowly, gradually starts to reject it. Everybody has their own differences in terms of the body's differences in terms of how long it'll take to reject it. But the body rejects, that's one. The second is the drug itself is nephrotoxic. So I don't, do any bad things. Even I don't even touch alcohol. So they know that there is no other third injury that was happening. But between these two, based off of the biopsy they did, they basically said either a little bit of it is because of rejection, and a little bit of it is because of the nephrotoxicity. And that's typically the case in most cases. Sometimes if you have a match that is really good, with all HLAs, everything's lined up and matching, then your drug, immunosuppressives are much more reduced. So which gives you a much bigger outcome. So that's the other thing. So that could happen, but getting your own match is extremely challenging.
Agree. So again, coming back to Srinivas Garu, again, this question will be also for Ramjee Garu, is that what are the key challenges that everyone faces today in transplantation of kidney?
I think people need to understand that whether you go through dialysis or we go through transplant, it is not a cure. It is only a stopgap measure till the next round of need surfaces. So for example, dialysis, on the average, people live up to 5 years if you don't go through transplant, or if you didn't get a chance to go through transplant in that time period. On the average, I'm talking about. On the average, people can manage for 5 years without any fatal effects. If you get a cadaverous donation, the average life is around 10 years. If you get a living donation, the average life of the graft is around 15 years. The reason is very similar to what, in fact, not similar, but reason exactly is what Srini was telling. The body, the immune system of your body by default always wants to reject that is anything foreign. Your immunosuppressants are slowly tricking the immune system to say, hey, ignore it. But the damage, meaning the slow punching into your graft, never stops. So that's why they say average of 15 years and 10 years for cadaverous and 15 years for living. I've seen cases where people lived up to 35 years with the same graft. I've seen cases where the graft rejected immediately after the transplant, right? I suspect in case of my parents and my aunt and my uncle, probably the same thing. My dad's organ probably got rejected within the span of 6 months, and they didn't even know. The system is not robust enough to kind of keep an eye on what's going on. Even here today, my nephrologist, who is actually director of a transplant program at TGH, told me only one thing: Ramjee, the fact that you went through transplant doesn't give you a blank check for life. We only did what we could do based on what we knew. But your immune system is such a mystery. I cannot guarantee you that tomorrow it won't start rejecting. We have better ways to manage it. So meaning the moment they suspect rejection, they bring you into the hospital, and there are things that they can actually do to stop the rejection, but it's not foolproof. So I think that's one thing people have to understand, that it's a one-time deal and you're done. Most likely, if I'm on the lucky side of the spectrum, maybe I don't need one. So I'm 52 now. It's already 3 years into the transplant. If I'm like the 25, 30-year range side, then I probably don't even care. By the time I need the transplant, I'll be 70 or so. I'll say, all right, I'm going to just take it easy and go through dialysis and be done with it. Whatever life I get beyond that, I'm okay. But if I fall on the other side of the spectrum, and if I need transplant in another 10 to 12 years again, I'm only 60, 61. It's too early to say I'm not going to do anything about it, right? So that risk is always there. So people don't understand. Hey, you got treated, your surgery is done. What is the big deal? The drugs we take, the side effects are severe. Not every day is the same. Someday I wake up feeling nothing, everything is fine. Someday I wake up with severe pain in my legs. It's body behaves differently. But I tell everybody one thing though, anything is better than dialysis, because I know I actually can have a cup of tea in the morning after I brush my teeth, watch the birds, listen to the sounds of the garden, and enjoy that cup of tea. Previously, when I was on dialysis, enjoying the cup of tea became like almost a non-pleasure event. I have to have a tea because I'm used to it, but there was no pleasure. As I said, the only thing I told myself is, Ramjee, you gotta live so that when the help comes, you are there to receive it. What's the point? Somebody comes forward and realize that Ramjee is not there anymore. It doesn't work, right? So that's the challenging part. So, but overall, I'm very happy with where I am today, because pretty much doing everything. Do you have the same energy levels? Not really. The energy levels are obviously very different than what I had previously when my kidney was functioning great. But am I doing everything that I needed to? Yes, absolutely. I'm doing everything that I needed to, going to work, taking care of kids' activities, doing my chores at home, laundry, dishes, this and that. So overall, the life routine came back to as normal as it can be for a transplant patient.
That's wonderful. And Srinivas, just adding to the same question, what do you think, your thoughts about side effects of kidney transplant and the different challenges?
Yeah, definitely that's after the transplant, I went through everything that Ramjee was saying.
Yeah.
And that's a life. I can't really plan way ahead. If somebody says, hey, what will you do during retirement?
Mm-hmm.
I would never think about that, because that's too far, So, those things are out of question for us. At least for me, those are out of question. Now I'm on dialysis. Again, for me, I'm hoping that, as Ramjee said, someday somebody will come forward. 5 to 8 years is a long time to be on dialysis. That's almost impossible to survive that long. You really have to be lucky. So I'm hoping that somebody will come along. I did have these little goals, like, hey, I just want to see my son graduate or my daughter graduate, small goals. So that kind of helps a little bit. So you actually look forward to it, and you say, I need to live, right? So,
It's very hard. It's very hard. I can understand what Srinivas Garu is going through it right now. And this is where we need to spread message that why we need a donor, why it is very, very needed now. It's a must. And we request that a lot of people who are listening should understand how many difficult hurdles a person who's undergoing dialysis is undergoing in his life. There's so much of, mental stress too. And I would definitely ask here too, because again, I want to just move because Srinivas Garu is already, this is very important for Srinivas Garu, like for him getting it, not waiting that long. Is we need donors who want to jump in and help him. Ramjee Garu, could you just add in here to what Srinivas Garu said is how according to you is the best way to spread message for getting living donor for helping Srinivas Garu?
As I said, take advantage of every possible media outlet out there, neighborhood magazine, wear t-shirts, request your friends to wear t-shirts when they go out in public, ask people to write on their cars. And in fact, it's one funny story happened when some news anchor saw my car with the message saying that, save my life. And then they called me and they aired my story a couple of times and they kind of followed through the whole transplant. I don't know how many people actually got inspired by that, but I'm sure when you listen to the story, a positive outcome that actually happened, hey, by the way, somebody did get a transplant. They heard the story through this and that. I'm sure it'll help. Okay. The other thing that I would like to mention is the typical reaction that I've observed in our community is, it's not going to happen to me. That's how they take the approach. And they always wonder, why is Ramjee going crazy asking everyone? It's not like I'm stopping people on the road and then asking, but I'm doing the things in a passive way so that people who are interested can respond. It so happened, our friend who lives 5 miles from us called me in 2021 telling me that his son, 12 years old son, in the Tampa General Hospital with a failed kidney. Both kidneys have failed. And for a moment, we didn't understand, who are you talking about? Are we talking about the kid that we met, a couple of weeks ago? Come to find out, apparently the kid had the same exact disease of the children version. I have the adult version. That's why I started getting sick after I turned 40, but he got sick the moment he turned 11 or 12, and they didn't even know his kidneys literally failed. And we discussed and all the things that I've done in terms of spreading the message. The kid was on dialysis for 6 months, but luckily the neighborhood magazine aired the story of the need for kidney donation. Some person in the community, which is around 2 miles from us, looking for a restaurant, a recommendation, and that person never opened the neighborhood magazine, opened the neighborhood magazine because he happened to be at a doctor's hospital for something, and then he saw the neighborhood magazine and opened it up. There you go, the story of the kid popped out, and he immediately called my friend. Within 2 weeks, he was tested, matched, and the surgery was over. So what is the chance of this happening? We don't know. It so happened, they chose to publish it in the neighborhood magazine, and it so happened that this person looking for a restaurant choice read the story. And in fact, he just said, Tampa General Hospital said, well, we're going to schedule it in a certain date. And the donor actually said, listen, the kid is suffering. I'm a match. I want you to take my kidney tomorrow. And they had to move things and get the transplant scheduled sooner than they were originally anticipating. So from the identification of the donor to the surgery, everything happened in 2 to 3 weeks. So we feel very fortunate, but the reason why it happened is because the story went out. If we somehow increase the exposure to the story, out of a million people watching it, one person responds, and that's the one person we need.
Yeah, story needs to be spread is the biggest phrase here, because sometimes, as you mentioned, you never felt like it has to be closed, and you never felt what other people will think about you. It is your life, and you want to come out and talk and share about your life. I mean, that's one thing. Probably most of the people, they cut it off thinking that why should they even know about my life,
Right.
And sometimes that can be one of the reasons too. Coming to same thing, Ramjee Garu, and again to Srinivas Garu. I mean, of course, we all know now for Srinivas Garu, we've been doing so much with social media. We are trying to spread. It has happened that people have come, but isn't it very, very difficult for immigrants in US to run through this entire process, because most of the calls you get are from other countries where it's very difficult to have a collaboration with them, get to know how truthful they are in the entire process, or is it only just monetary help they're asking? But it is, and I mean, this is a question again for both of you. Isn't it too difficult, and it's running too much difficult for immigrants in the US to run through this entire process?
It's
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead, Srini.
No, you please go ahead.
Because we are originally from India, the immediate reaction is, can we simultaneously search for the donor in both places, in US as well as in India? The challenge is there is for this initial screening, there is no effective mechanism to say so-and-so actually is a viable candidate. Even if you go through the hoops to conduct the initial screening blood work, then how would you bring that person who is willing to come here? There is no category of visa to say, hey, I'm going to be a kidney donor, or I'm going to be an organ donor. Please give me a visa. I'm going to just get on the plane, help my family, friend, whoever that is, and then go back. So there is privacy. There is element of abuse. There is monetary related matters. There, chances of fraud. So I finally decided that I know Srini was lucky enough to get somebody from India, but I think he was very fortunate during his first encounter. I finally gave up on that friend. I decided it's not going to happen.
I believe Ramjee, even though he had it, I think he had a lot of other things which he had to go through. Remember when he was telling his story?
Yep.
Srinivas Garu had to go through a lot of other law-abiding steps with the person there. So it was definitely a challenge even for him to get it from there. Yeah. And coming to, I mean, the same thing, as you were, continue, Ramjee Garu, because I was just trying to say that it was very difficult when we say to come getting someone from India or some other, their own country, then getting it from US itself. It's way easier to get people from here.
Right. And what I personally witnessed is that the response from our own community was literally non-existing, zero. Nobody is willing to listen. Nobody is willing to talk. Nobody is willing to even understand what's going on. Every call that I got is from a person from different background, different race, different country. And in fact, my donor, Brian, posed me one question. Ramjee, I'm kind of very surprised that with just such a great friendship circle that you had, not even a single person from your community come forward, knowing that they are all engineers, doctors, lawyers with multiple degrees, bachelors, masters, with PhDs. And I didn't have an answer. For that. I wouldn't necessarily say they're not helpful. They were there for me. When I needed to go to the hospital, taking care of children when we were going through the surgery, this and that. For all those aspects, they're there. But none of the contacts actually came forward to really save the life. That's what I needed, right? So it's very hard for me. It's very hard, and it's very difficult to even. I didn't have an answer for Brian when Brian posed me that question, because Brian said, listen, all I did was I wanted to do it, and then I Googled a couple things and made sure that things are going to be okay, and then I decided. I didn't really need lots of convincing to do what I needed to do, right? Even his whole family, his wife, his children, his father, mother, nobody stopped him for a single second. Because if you think about it, if the spouse or if the parents, if the kids say, you're not doing it, they're not doing it, right? If the spouse is bugging you, constantly not to do it, you can override and then do it. So I actually, whatever credit I give to Brian, I also give the same exact credit to the spouse, the children, parents.
Yes.
Everybody was like, you go. They were all rooting for it, you know? And I didn't necessarily see that mindset in our community yet. As I said, everybody always thought it's not me, it's not going to happen to me. Come to find out, within 6 months of my transplant, our own friend had to go through this. And again, where did the help come from? The help come from somebody that doesn't belong to our community.
Correct. I think the fear that most of our people have from the South Asian communities are, if I give the organ, what will happen if I need one? What will happen out of 2 kidneys if I give one? And if I have an issue with the one given kidney, tomorrow what will happen to me? I mean, they do not, it's basically they're trying to figure out their life in a different way, that possibly I will fall sick. It's all the negative thoughts that come into their mind. I'm not saying that everyone is like that again, because I think it's the people, even in our community, if they want to give, Ramjee, what I personally saw is if they have a number of health issues, right? They have a fear that this may be one of the points too, which will be eventually this may be destroyed down the lane. So it's just a fear factor. Most of our
I
Asians,
think,
just this,
yeah, you're right. Partially, it's the insecurity.
Yeah.
Because they all feel they are in a foreign land, they're adapting, integrating, but not sure. I mean, I did have one person who actually did come forward from our community, although unfortunately he didn't qualify for it. But it's rare. It's almost impossible to get somebody from your community here in US.
Yes.
But in India, you could. If you're living in India, then probably you could. That's my guess. Again, it's never easy. There are so many laws and restrictions on how you can do that. It was almost impossible for me to get anybody here, and it's almost impossible for me to go there and get a transplant either. That's not possible either, because the regulations do not allow that.
Right.
In general, altruistic donation in India is not allowed. It has to be from your family member, whereas here in US, altruistic donation is allowed. So I think that's the main difference.
You're right. It has to be a family member there.
I want to just end here today. For first, I mean, of course, number one is coming to technology part. How soon do you both think that artificial kidneys will be available? Or is it still in the process, or are they still working into it? Because technology, the reason I'm talking about technology is we have reached every limit in technology. We have gone through, even we're reaching Mars and we're reaching different planets, but this has been going from decades, probably from 60 years or so, if I'm not wrong. And if it has been there and people are in the same boat for so many years, searching, having this issue, every day we hear that people are looking for donors, living donors or deceased donors. But when, how soon and how long will it take for artificial kidneys to be available? I mean, for
Yeah, I mean, technology, when you say technology, it's a funny thing how people believe that there is this technology and all we have to do is just do research in that direction and solve the problem. It's not that easy. You do need some funding. That is the biggest part. And usually the funding has the limited funds that comes purely for research has too many competitors. But the existing ecosystem, the way it is set up, it's not very conducive to come up with a cure. Yes, there are people working on it. There are lots of researchers who are doing it. But ideally, where is the profit? How do you measure the profit of curing this? That's one problem, one issue. And the funds that are given out, without any thought for about profits, those are very limited. And so if you think about it, the amount of research being done in trying to find a cure is very little compared to the amount of research that's being done to, for example, come up with a better and better and better drugs, or better and better and better equipment to, to continue on dialysis. Those things, there's huge amount of funds there to work on that, but not on trying to cure it. In fact, we don't even know what would be a cure, in what direction are we need to take this.
That's
So we
right.
are really on the medical side of things. It appears like we are making leaps and bounds. We are really not. The transplant that we are doing today is the same transplant we have done 50 years ago. It's the same thing. The drugs have improved. Still, it's still an immunosuppressives that we have to follow through. So there are other things that have been tried out, being tested, like the stem cells, the wearable kidneys, or artificial kidneys, or 3D printed kidneys. I mean, these have all been explored, but there's not huge amount of funding going in there to actually get to the conclusion of finding a solution. That's what I think is the issue right now with the technology part of it.
Absolutely agree. And Ramjee Gar, do you want to add on to this?
Yeah, I actually, at the end of the day, it all boils down to show me the money. If you think about the dialysis and the outfits that are out there and the amount of revenue that they generate, similarly, even in simple thing like controlling diabetes, they make more money by actually giving you diabetes medicine rather than curing it, right? Everything boils down to show me the money part of it. But I still also believe that the fact that we've seen so many cures for so many things over a period of time actually happens because of that one person, that one entity that does selfless service to the humanity. So that will happen eventually. But in the meantime, we have to battle through this show me the money puzzle. There is no way out.
I agree. Just because we are running in time now, less time, but definitely this is a talk which we can continue for long, and also ask every person who will be listening this eventually to help and to come forward to be a donor, because the importance of donors, you know how it is. And we have listened to the stories of both one, the recipient, and who was looking for a donor, that why and how this, how one goes through this chronic kidney disease and this dialysis, all this, it is an opportunity for others to understand and also come forward and to really be altruistic, because you need to come out and try to help your friends, your neighbors. And I would just want to say here this, nowadays, everyone knows that we have support groups can be found in all sorts of places. And also for people who got the transplant or are still looking for, the great place is to connect online. There are many discussion forums. When I was actually doing the research, I myself saw there were many research discussion forums, and there are numerous websites and blogs. My little advice, because I went through it, even though I'm not a person who's looking for it, I just wanted to go and learn more about it. You don't have to feel that you're alone in this. So seek others who are also going through, like how Srinivas Garu, and we could even talk to Ramjee Garu. Seek others who are going through the similar experiences, and be open about your fears, your concerns, and also the successes too. There are so many good things that happen. Now the pro point with social media is that it has opened the door to the whole new type of support group, because that is allowing those who don't have any support group at all in their community, because not every state or every town has a local community which helps, or who are shy meeting in person. They have the ability now to actually connect with others and talk. So this VFS story, which we talked, it doesn't end here. And this is only going to provide this particular host of stories, which talks about this challenging gift that one is looking for, is only possible if someone listens and understands and comes out to help us. And if anyone is there who out there listening to us and would love to connect with Dr. Sonti, you can please let us know and we can connect you with him. At the same time, thank you very much, Ramjee Garu, for giving us the ideas and tips as to how one can go forward and advertise and tell openly, how we need the donors and we are really in need of it, not just asking for help. So dear friends, yeah, please go ahead.
If I can say one thing, I don't know how many people are actually listening, but one thing that I'd like to make sure that they understand that once you decide to help, come forward to get tested for Srini, and you eventually accept the fact that you would like to be a donor for him, you are always, the donor always is number one in the waiting list, God forbid, if they need an organ in the future. So that system exists. The donors are treated very, very good in terms of making sure that they get the support they need, God forbid, if the need arises for them in the future. So I think many people don't understand that, meaning if I give my kidney away or if I give a piece of liver away, what happens if I need one? You are not left alone. The system exists to make sure that you are in the top of the waiting list when, if at all, the need arises. So that's it. I wanted to make sure that the people who are listening can understand that, and maybe that will change their mind to come forward to screen for Srini.
And Srinivas Garu, do you want to say something to our listeners, which definitely this will go everywhere. I'm going to make sure that VFS goal is to spread this in every single channel where people can see. Is there something that you want to say?
I'm not sure what else I could say. I did.
And for the donors, because, this is, we are asking the donors to help you just on your part.
Yeah, definitely. I have my story written on a website. I did send it to you, Pratima Garu.
Yes.
If you can place that story in there, please feel free to take a look. See if it is something that you would be interested in. And there are, within that website, there is a place where you can go anonymously and inquire more about it, talk to the doctors, hospital, and everything's anonymous. They don't even mention about it to me. I would never even come to know if you have even approached them. And once everything is all said, only then they will let me know if there is a match. Otherwise, I wouldn't even know. So
what we will do is, Srinivas Garu, after when we post it, and of course on our YouTube channel, we'll make sure that particular website which you have given, will connect it there, so that those who want to really donate, want to come forward to help you, they can get into that, right? And they can put all the information there and find about you.
Yes.
It directly goes to the hospital, right? That's how it's connected.
Yeah, there's a phone number, the website, there's plenty of information there that if you want to just browse through.
Absolutely, will do. Thank you so much. And I think I just wanted to conclude here to both Ramjee Garu and Srinivas Garu that about just, again, what we are doing, again, as our organization does, we are trying to build a society like this, where it's not just seniors, but people who are, who are waiting for help, and in different ways. It need not be, they can be disabled, they may have any other health issues. So we come forward here and we're trying to empower and to make their lives happy to their fullest potential, what we can do. So again, thank you everyone who will be watching us again, who is watching us today and will be watching us again on YouTube channels. Please don't miss it. This is very, very important stories that we want to spread it and make sure everyone comes forward and help. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Ramjee Garu. Thank you.
Thank you, Srini. Good luck, Srini.